All right, welcome back. We are doing IT offboarding this week. And before we get to that, I want to talk a little bit about the philosophy of the show. Something I've mentioned, something I've been building, which is a bit of a manifesto on evergreen content. And what I'm trying to do is create content where the tools don't really matter that much. And as a result, I'm going to try and mix up the tools a little bit as we go along, just to show you that what we're building here is enduring processes, enduring systems, evergreen content that makes it so that you managing your business, your organization can apply this in organizing people or machines. There's a lot of talk about, oh, I'm going to have agents do this. Well, you're still going to have to work in some kind of organized fashion. You're still going to have to make decisions about what happens. And I think transition points are pivotal for when you make big operational decisions. As a matter of fact, some of the main work that I have to deal with on any given week is what's happening as people transition in and out, more in, thankfully, of our organization. And that's where a lot of systems and processes are made. And they create opportunities for buy-in from new employees, for design and improvement, for creating a better culture. They also create huge opportunities for risk. And that's a little bit of what I want to talk about today. So we did IT onboarding in the last show, and now we're doing IT offboarding. And the relationship between these two things is asymmetrical. So IT onboarding is one of those things that you should definitely get it right. And when you don't get it right, it will annoy a lot of employees, and new recruits will then take some of that experience into the rest of their time working for you. It's a classic first impression problem. If you mess up the IT onboarding, they're kind of wondering what's next, what's about to go wrong. But I'll say that the blast radius for poor IT onboarding is more limited, because eventually they're going to get access to the systems they need. By hook or by crook, they'll figure it out. And because they're people you want to have working for you, that's fine. They're going to figure out how to do it. But IT offboarding is much different. This is where you are exposed to a much higher degree of risk. It's actually not so much about the employee's experience, and it's much more about the company's ability to manage the risk. And what do I mean by that? If you allow an ex-employee to retain access to a system, there's no telling what they may be able to do with that. In the vast majority of cases, it'll be benign. In some cases, it'll be benign but still harmful, because it'll become a vector for attack or a vector for some kind of security issue. And in the worst cases, it'll be an actual vector for something malicious for either that person to do or someone else on their behalf. So you have to be really, really, really cautious about the IT offboarding. And the way you want to think about it is it should directly mirror your IT onboarding process, but then it should also have additional steps to do some stress testing and make sure to work with the departments and the managers to ensure that system access has been revoked. Another aspect of this that has less to do with malicious intent against the company, but you also don't want ex-employees to be still attached to your business from a legal ramification standpoint. You never want a customer emailing them something confidential accidentally and that person being implicated in something that they didn't decide to. So for the sake of those employees and for the sake of your business, you got to get IT offboarding right. And that's why it is an asymmetric risk when we talk about these two processes. So if you're thinking about which process to invest a little bit more in, I recommend both, obviously, but if you have to choose one, I'd say IT offboarding is much more critical, but IT onboarding will help you create a better culture in the workplace. So with that, let's take a look at what we did with IT onboarding in the last show. So we want to effectively reverse this process. We don't need to necessarily do it in reverse order, and I'll talk about why that is, but what we want to do is get the person out of the system of record, then we want to reverse everything in the company checklist, same with the role-based checklist. And then if there's a department checklist, we also want to reverse that. Now, the reason we don't just flip this thing upside down and start with the department, the role-based company, and then the system of record is we actually want to cut off access at the point of the system of record. So if you're running a more sophisticated IT operation, this system of record is going to be the key thing that person needs to access in order to access the other systems. So by cutting off access here, you've probably eliminated 80% of the risky vectors, right? So that's why this needs to be the first thing. And so we'll talk about that as we put the flow together for IT offboarding. So let's head over to Lucidchart and we'll take this, change it up a little bit and switch it to a flow for IT offboarding. All right, so here's our flow, and what we've done is updated some of the phrasing here. So we have a former employee or contractor. We're going to offboard first from the personnel system of record. This means cutting off as much access as we can instantly. And then we want to offboard from the company checklist. This is the inverse of what we had on IT onboarding. And then we want to offboard from the role-based checklist. In some cases, this may happen before this. It probably depends on the role and how the permissions are provisioned. And then if there is some kind of department related onboarding, then we want to offboard from the department checklist, work with the department head to do that. And then what we want to do is a stress test. And the stress test is a manual look at what new systems have we added since this person was onboarded. And this is particularly relevant with employees or contractors who've been with your firm for years. And in some cases, the things they had access to changed quite a bit. Now, what you're going to find in this category is, on one hand, there's actually going to be integrations and some other systems tied to this person. There might even be systems they administer that you actually have to figure out how to get that onto somebody else's plate. And that's a good thing to do as a pre-mortem before someone leaves. But if you don't have time, if something is done in a rush due to some kind of ethical concern or some kind of fast-paced layoff, then sometimes you don't always have the ability to do that. So as part of the stress test, you might find systems that need to get a new home. And what you're going to do is look for those things, offboard. And offboarding in some cases can mean just removing access, or in some cases can mean we need to find a new home for this thing. We need to find a new person to own this integration. And then continue the stress test. And you're going to keep doing that until you don't find anything. And then once you have not found anything, you're going to make this complete. Now, the other thing I haven't added to this because it's not part of the official IT offboarding process, but as you find these additional systems, you need to start adding those to the checklist, the offboarding checklist. So that means as an additional system comes into view, you say, oh, that's right, I forgot that we added this new diagramming tool. I want to make sure to add that to our checklist now. And sometimes things from the departmental checklist will have moved into the company checklist because they're tools that are now more widely adopted. And we talked about that in the last one, where there's a 3 to 6 month period where some things will be owned by a department, but eventually as it has wider adoption, it's going to go out to the rest of the business, right? So this is the important part right here. I really want to emphasize this, that you're looking at not just checking the box with this whole process, but making sure you get down to these additional systems that the person owns, and then adjusting the process and the checklist as you move forward with that. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this and we're going to throw it into the document, the show notes. And then what I'm going to do is today we're actually going to work with Claude, and we're going to see what Claude comes up with as our flow, looking at the diagram as well as the transcript from this part of the episode. So we're going to do the same process that we've done in a lot of the episodes when we're building out a process, which is take the transcript of the first part of the episode, take the diagram, throw it into Claude, see what it comes up with. But I wanted to use Claude this week as opposed to ChatGPT to show you that we are not bound to a specific tool set. And I can only presume a year from now I'm going to be using totally different tools for everything, but the principles, the evergreen content, will remain the same. All right, so we pulled the transcript out of the first part, and we also have the flowchart. And so what I've done here is gone into Claude Pro, and here's the prompt I have. I'm in the process of recording a podcast/screencast called Building Process. I've already recorded the first part of the show where I speak a bit about the philosophy of the show and also about the IT offboarding process we are developing today. I'm uploading a flowchart and a transcript of the first part of the show. Can you give me a process document or an SOP that explains IT offboarding step by step? So this is us taking those assets, prompting Claude this time, as opposed to ChatGPT, Claude, to build us out a process document that takes our flowchart and actually documents that out into an SOP. So let's see what it comes up with here. All right, so Claude generated a process for us, and I'm reminded using this how much I actually like many aspects of the way the Claude UI works and how it generated this. So this is great because it intuited the style that we already use for a lot of our process documents, and I liked how it talked about risk up here and focused on some of the asymmetric nature of IT offboarding versus IT onboarding. Now, it also talks about the different stages, which I really like, because this provides a framework, a context that you could throw in a different kind of IT offboarding process, just to know that these are the different kinds of stages within the flow. So we have system of record here, and it talks about some of the pieces of that process, which I really like, and gives a why for why to do it first, and then a timeline, which is cool. We didn't really talk about that, but it intuited that from the discussion. And then we have the company checklist. It came up with some standard likely options here. Also talked about the timeline, which is interesting, and says within 24 hours. So gives a little bit of that latitude to understand the different priority on the different pieces, which once again is a cool thing that Claude intuited here. And then we have the role-based checklist. I don't actually understand why this timeline would be any different. It's probably the same as this one, but it's probably just trying to create a stepwise function here. So that's something I might update in the final document if I was actually implementing this within the company. And then the department, once again, I think this could also be done at the same time. So the timeline here, 48 to 72 hours, probably doesn't need to be the case. I'd say this should also be within the first 24 hours. So if I was to ask Claude to update it, I would say maybe put this all within 24 hours. And that's something you can also update manually. And then I like the stress test over here. Talks about some of the things you need to do. And then talks about adding additional systems to the checklist. So this is something we didn't put in the flow, but we talked about in the episode. So this is really good. And then it included down here, like all the roles and all the completion documents, some of the best practices, and then also has a nice different set of tests you run for different kinds of people leaving the business, which is very cool. Last thing I did, which is really nice, revision history, and then includes sample checklist here. So I think Claude did a really good job of expanding on the surface area of what we could possibly do in IT offboarding. I would have my issues with this at the margin in terms of what exactly we do. It's probably a little too robust relative to what I would do, but I like that they just plan for all possible options here. So I'm going to take this. As usual, I'm going to throw this into the show notes document, and then this is going to be available for the IT offboarding episode. So we got some more good episodes coming up. I know this is a holiday week, so we'll start recording on the normal schedule again next week. But we're going to be doing a few more processes, and we're also going to do a couple more episodes talking about some of the different topics that have been interesting, especially remote work seems to be something that different kind of managers, different kinds of operations people are struggling with. I would encourage you to check out the YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/buildingprocess/@buildingprocess. That's the channel right here. You can see all of the episodes there. And then we also have, if we go here, the Substack. Let's see here. buildingprocess.substack.com. You can just subscribe here, and then that'll give you the podcast information, throw that into your feed. You'll also get an email when new episodes come out. However you prefer to ingest this, I like to have both options. Obviously, if you're really trying to mirror the process, the YouTube and the video option is best, but if you're just trying to intake some new ideas along your morning commute, then the podcast should just be good enough for you. So check it out, buildingprocess.substack.com and youtube.com/@buildingprocess. Trying to build out evergreen operations content, and that's what we did today. So the IT onboarding and offboarding, regardless of the tools you use, regardless of the place you are at with your business, is going to be something that you'll need to do, and a process you'll need to have regardless of how things change in the next couple of years.